Hey everybody, it's Rob Herring, co-founder of Earth Conscious Life, director of The Need to Grow. I am joined today by an incredible woman, Lauren Abelin. We're going to talk about some of the biggest things to look out for when you're going to the grocery store. We're living in an age where there's virtually infinite options when it comes to foods that we purchase either in person or online these days. So Lauren has put together a really cool presentation today called The 5 Red Flag Ingredients to Avoid at the Grocery Store. So we're going to talk about some of the simplest things that you can watch out for so that when you pick up a product, you have a pretty good idea, is this an automatic no? Lauren has a lot of experience with this. So Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today to help our viewers and our listeners navigate this increasingly complex world of how to buy healthy food.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm happy to be here and get to share this knowledge with everybody. I am the co-founder of Plant Baby, and because of that journey that I've been on, helping to build a food and beverage company, you get to see behind the scenes. And I've learned a lot along the way, as well as being an avid label reader myself for the last 2 decades plus, managing chronic illness like millions and millions of Americans specifically are. And I've learned a lot from that as well. So I'm happy to share.
Yeah, just like you, as a lot of our listeners maybe had, unfortunately, that same experience was navigating their food choices after they or someone in their family dealt with either a chronic condition or some sort of health challenge that they weren't able to fix with conventional means. So when we start to realize that, of course, we are what we eat, we need to know what really is even food at all. And of course, we want to buy as much fresh produce as possible, local, organic. But beyond that, we're going to talk about these 5 red flags. So I love how you've put these together for us, because I agree that these are some of the easiest things to watch out for when we flip the carton around and we're looking at that ingredient list. So why don't we briefly talk about what those 5 things are before we get into the nitty-gritty as to how exactly they affect our health and why it's so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 1 on the list, we have highly processed oils, specifically seed oils. And this would look like sunflower oil, safflower oil. We'll get more into that. Probably one of the most prevalent ingredients you'll see on the back of a box in the grocery store. So we'll talk more about that later. The second one, gums and emulsifiers. You'll find this in a lot of plant-based ingredients. And third on the list, natural flavors. More and more products, you'll see natural flavors on the back. We'll talk about.
Not quite as natural as many people might be led to believe, and we'll discuss that in a minute.
Totally. And yes, it's a billion-dollar industry, the food science, natural flavor industry. Very interesting. Fourth on the list is synthetic fortification. That looks like the vitamins and minerals that are synthetically added to and fortified to different like plant-based milks, enriched flour, breads, and why you would want to avoid those, because that appears to be a good thing, vitamins and minerals. But when it's synthetic fortification, we'll get into what that really looks like and means. And then the 5th on the list is glyphosate, which has been in the news a lot recently. And studies are now backing up and proving that glyphosate, the widespread use of that herbicide, does negatively impact our health and can be linked to causing cancer.
Yep. And a bit trickier to identify that one since it's not on the label, but we'll talk about some tricks and how we can navigate that. So why do you think this is so important for parents nowadays? Not just parents. It could be, any grown adult, whether or not you have kids. As we've watched our food system sort of transition over these last couple of decades, many people may not realize how much weirder and stranger and more chemically industrialized it's become.
Right. It's such a great question. I mean, we've seen that overall, the population of humans, our health is declining. Nowadays, we're finding out that the health statistics are more and more, unfortunately, alarming, especially when it comes to our kids. 2 in 5 children have a chronic illness. 1 in 13 have a food allergy. And these statistics are important to be aware of, and we can also do something about it. And along with other, health issues beyond chronic illness, like obesity, 1 in 5 children are now obese. 9 in 10 children are not eating enough vegetables. And we know that with each of these stats, it can be hard to navigate it. Vegetables are expensive, especially organic vegetables are expensive. And there's something going on at large, like that you touched on earlier, that's greater within the food system. We're not being set up to thrive. Our health is negatively impacted by this. And that's why a deep dive like this with certain individuals is important, because as we get smarter and have more knowledge around the behind the scenes, and we know what to do, we can start to take our health back. And when doctors say the first thing to look at is your diet, when you have a health issue, if they're a good doctor, they'll probably tell you, the first thing to look at is your diet. Well, what does that mean? How do you look at your diet? And with these 5 foods to avoid, we can really get into that. And then, the health of the planet is also at stake. Our health is being impacted by the food system, the way that it's grown. If there is herbicide use, the soil is getting depleted. And then how it's processed and packaged impacts our health. But, the planet's health is linked to our health as well. 30% of total global emissions come from food production. And so, as we dive deep into this, know that there are really great options out there, and having this list in your head and how to avoid it and what to look into will become easier and more accessible, as you continue to go to the grocery store and buy. Hopefully it won't feel overwhelming and you'll feel empowered.
Yeah, I know that you and I both share that philosophy that human health and planetary health are so interconnected. It's a big part of the work that I do, and I know that you're doing as well. And so as we start to pay more attention to these things to take back our own health, it inevitably is, supporting biodiversity, supporting the types of farmers that we want to be supporting, that we want to be putting our money towards, supporting types of policies and farming practices that are going to help regenerate our planet and simultaneously regenerate our own health. So on the human health side of things, we know that people are getting sicker and sicker. And I've done a lot of work around the agricultural issues, but more specifically when it comes to people, what do you think they're lacking now? Like what really has changed so much in the human diet that we feel like we have to even supplement at all?
Mm-hmm. Such an important topic. Such a great question. I think that our diet used to be made up of mostly fresh whole foods, fruit, vegetables, and really high quality meat and dairy. If you go back 100 years, even 50 years, it was just a whole food based diet, not a lot of processed food. And when you process and package a food so that it stays on the shelf longer, it's usually missing the essential nutrients and vitamins and minerals that we used to get from the whole foods that we were eating 3 times a day. I would say some of the main minerals and vitamins, magnesium, were mostly magnesium deplete, such a crucial mineral for our body to function. Zinc is really important. There's whole food sources of zinc that come from sprouted seeds. And omega-3s are really important as well that we're not getting enough of. We used to get omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6 fatty acids kind of in a 1-to-1 ratio. Our diet would allow for there to be a natural balance when it was whole food based. And now that as a society, we've shifted more into packaged foods, the omega-3s have gone down because we're consuming, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of highly processed seed oils, and they are very high in omega-6. So high that the ratio now, which I just mentioned used to be 1-to-1, is now 20-to-1. The omega-6 high, much higher, and the omega-3 much lower. And we need it really for our body to control inflammation, for it to be at a more balanced ratio. Fiber, we don't naturally consume as much fiber anymore. That's usually deplete in packaged processed foods. And so when we're lacking those essential nutrients in our diet, it's really hard for our bodies to stay in this homeostasis state where we can fight off, the regular cold, because of the need for our bodies to be able to control inflammation. Really, it's the number one key to health, and processed food can often lead to inflammation.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're in a food system now where we cannot just eat the standard American diet, because we will get, as my friend Ocean Robbins always says, the standard American diseases if we eat that way. And as you mentioned, the food sources that most people are going towards, unfortunately, the burden is on us as consumers to be educated, empowered, and aware of this, because if we don't take those steps, we are eating these really depleted food sources that don't have these critical both macro and micronutrients. So I'm glad that you mentioned those oils, because it leads us into the first of these 5 red flags, something that so many of us are starting to hear the buzz about. The buzz of the negative impact of seed oils is starting to really gain some traction, thankfully. A lot of these oils are rancid and inflammatory in the body. So let's talk about those oils. When you hear seed oils, what are some of those things to flip that product around and look for and go, nope, don't want that, put it back on the shelf?
Yeah. These seed oils are in 90% of crackers, anything that's in a box that is crunchy. It's very common. So when you're looking at that list, you'll see maybe sunflower oil is in there, safflower oil, canola oil, which is also rapeseed oil. That's very common in like the most popular oat milk in the world right now, uses that oil so that it's creamier and froths. Soybean oil, cottonseed oil, those are the most common. But the two that you'll find on almost every box, which is really hard to navigate, especially if you're buying for kids, because you just want to grab a box of cereal. You just want to get them some crackers. And when you turn it around, you'll probably see sunflower seed oil or safflower seed oil. And that is really high in omega-6, like we talked about before. And you're right, it can go rancid and oxidize really quickly and easily, and not just outside of the body, but inside of the body as well. Those that can oxidize within our cells too. So, it's hard to avoid, but there are such great brands out there that know these cause issues, and they're creating products that have coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil instead of these seed oils.
Yeah, the tide, I think, is turning on this because of conversations like what we're having now, because more people are trying to learn about the negative impacts of these highly inflammatory seed oils. And so the burden now starts to switch over to the brands, because when the consumers speak with their dollars, vote with their dollars, and start writing to companies that they purchase from and say, hey, can you remove this from your product? Or I'm just going to stop buying it. Now we start to see the market shift, because this is the power that we have as consumers. And you're working on a brand that has been paying attention to a lot of this, and we'll talk more about Kiki Milk in a bit. But these negative inflammatory oils, they're cheaper, and unfortunately for most businesses, that's the bottom line that they're looking at. So this is a kind of the common culprit here is, what's the cheapest thing I can put in, either to fill it and to get a higher weight and I can sell more product, or preserve it for as long as possible so I'll make more money. I won't have to lose some profit there. But these oils are so inexpensive, and They're just used everywhere. And so the brands that are paying attention are the ones that we need to support. So those oils, I'm trying to cut them out of my diet as much as possible. Only when we go to restaurants, you probably have to ask, can you cook this either in olive oil or butter? You have to be kind of that annoying customer, but it's important to do. So let's talk about the gums and emulsifiers, because it's another one of these things that is, it's so weird to see that on the back of a label and go, what the heck even is that? And why would I want that in my body?
Right. You don't. We generally don't. And it has become so common. I think that consumers, all of us, we go into the grocery store, and if you do turn it around and read a label and you see these ingredients over and over and over again, you assume that they're A, safe, and B, there for a reason, and C, then I think just we make this judgment that it's like even good for us if it's in there.
Or there must be no other way to do it if it's there. Even if maybe it's not the best for us, well, there's no other way they could have made it.
Right. There's no other way. I think a lot of consumers, buyers, just regular people like you and I, maybe like 10 years ago, had more faith and trust in companies, especially food companies. They're making something you're putting into your body. And now we have a healthy skepticism while we're reading labels, which is important. Because unfortunately, they do put things in products that are not good for our health, and there are other ways of doing it. And those companies either built themselves, into a corner, and because they wanted to scale and grow really fast, they had to lower the quality of their product. But as somebody who is in the industry and building a food and beverage company, we all pretty much know what are the clean ingredients and if they're unnecessary or necessary. And every one of these ingredients on the 5 red flag list, they're unnecessary ingredients. So gums and emulsifiers, you'll find it in the majority of plant-based milk and plant-based yogurt. You'll even find them sometimes in pretzels, for whatever reason, if they want to bind it, if they want to bulk up the food that they're processing and packaging without actually adding more whole food to it, they'll put in a gum, an emulsifier. You'll see on the label xanthan gum, guar gum, locust bean gum, tapioca starch, carrageenan is one that has been in the news that we know that is, more negative than the other ones, because scientists came out and nutritionists came out and spoke about the negative impacts of carrageenan. So that one is used less, which, we did it. Like, people who speak about it, you'll start to see these ingredients disappearing from the label, but other gums are very commonly used. To use a specific example, because I know the most about plant-based milk, we have a blend. So we don't just use almonds. We have a blend in our milk of coconut, glyphosate-free oats, sprouted pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds. We put seaweed in there called aquamin for calcium. So we have only whole foods, and we have a lot of whole foods. And so when you drink it, it tastes rich and creamy and thick, but not too thick. It really has a nice consistency that you would want in a plant-based milk. It's because we put food in the milk. It's like, it's made of this blend, and then we have this plant-based milk. If you look at some of the other biggest brands, they primarily use water and gums and less than 1% of food, because it's expensive for them to actually put macadamia nuts, almonds, whatever oats, whatever they're putting in there. So they use less food, which cuts costs for them. And then they put the gums and emulsifiers in there, which tricks the mouth, that feeling, into thinking, oh, this is creamy and rich. It's usually just the oils, because that's in a lot of plant-based milks as well. The oil makes it creamy and the gum makes it feel thick, like there's food in there, but there's not. Gums are they're essentially indigestible. Nutritionists talk about that you really don't digest it, and it can cause intestinal discomfort, GI issues, especially for little kids. And their systems are, still developing. They're very sensitive. And, it's not ideal for them to be drinking something that's really filled with gums. Maybe it's the second or third ingredient on the label, which means there's a lot in there. For them to be drinking that every single day can have negative impact. So look for especially plant-based, because that's primarily where it's used. Look for the ingredient label that doesn't have gums, because they're out there. We're making them without the gums.
Yeah, I love how on this slide here we have an example of, we're not going to name any names of any brands, but these are real brands on each of these slides that show the ingredient list, just to familiarize ourselves with how to actually just turn this over, look for them. Where would they be listed? What do they really look like? To be totally frank, drinking those inflammatory oils is absolutely disgusting, right? So when I pick up one of those in the grocery store and I go, oh, is this one going to be okay? Flip it around, I'm repulsed. And I think that is the appropriate response. Unfortunately, as a culture, we've become desensitized to realize how absolutely disgusting some of these things are that are in what's supposed to be food. And the same thing is true with these gums. They're not food, so they don't need to be there. So I'm inspired by people like you who, found a way to actually do it differently, because you're raising the bar for the industry. This is why I wanted to have this conversation with you. I want to elevate your brand, this small business, because it's companies like yours across various different niches and products that can change the game when it comes to those larger monopolies or centralized brands, because we can actually start to say, wait a minute, it can be done differently. These brands are doing it differently. I know yours is doing it completely differently than when it comes to plant-based milk than pretty much anybody out there. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Let's move on to number 3 of these 5 red flags, the quote, natural flavors. So we've got artificial flavors that some people go, well, artificial, that's pretty obvious. I don't want that. So natural flavors must be the, counter to this. It must be natural because it's right there in the word. So tell us more about that. As an industry insider, I'm sure you learned quite a bit.
Yes, common knowledge, artificial flavors equal, not good. I think that many people try to steer away from artificial. When you see natural flavors, this term incorporates 1,000 different ways to take something that was once derived from something natural, like a fruit or a vegetable or even a meat, a yeast, a root. If you look up the US definition of natural flavors, it's very confusing and they lump a lot of stuff in there. And it once had to be derived from something, but then it can go through 100 iterations in a lab, ways to process it chemically, extract the flavor profile to essentially mimic something. And many natural flavors are, if you take a food in the beginning, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make that flavor taste like that food. If you want something to taste like, let's say grapefruit, they're using a totally different food from the beginning. And then after chemically extracting, sometimes with hexane and making it go through all of this processing, it'll eventually taste like a totally different food. So it's not, at the end of the day, natural anymore. It just means that it was once maybe derived from a food, and then it can be altered chemically in a lab, and it often is, so that it mimics a flavor profile that is addicting to your brain. So when you do consume something with natural flavors, those products are often harder to put down and stop eating. They do have an addictive quality because it's not tasting like a whole food. It's mimicking a flavor profile that scientists have spent a lot of time studying and researching, so that you'll continue to eat it. And then after you're done eating it, you'll crave it and then you'll buy it again. So that's what natural flavors really do, for the product, for the industry. They make you want to keep coming back for more. They make you want to keep eating it. And this is especially, I think, detrimental for little kids who are just learning how to eat, and also how to identify when they're full so that they stop eating naturally. That relationship with food is really important and very innate, except when you take a natural flavor and you alter it in a lab and you give a little kid something. That relationship with food is no longer innate. It's being obstructed by this flavor that is mimicking something that makes them want to keep eating it. And then it turns off that relationship that says, okay, I'm full, I'm done, I'm not hungry anymore, I'm going to put it aside. And I think that that's dangerous. As a mom, I really try to stay away from natural flavors, because it really impacts the brain and that need to keep eating. So
yeah, when I see natural flavors, I pretty much read it as artificial flavors. And I hope anybody listening does too. It kind of reminds me of that word perfume or fragrance that you can find in other products, that, candles or personal care products, that in that industry, there's a whole list, almost, endless list of chemicals that can go under that one label. And it's kind of the same thing here in the food industry when it comes to manufacturers, is that they can, as you've just described, they can put so much under that label, and we really don't know what it is. It's if it was a natural flavor like vanilla extract or something, it would actually have a name, and why wouldn't we just see that name? So this is something we definitely want to watch out for. It reminds me kind of excitotoxins and things that really do trick the mouth, right? So they're designing these foods to be like you mentioned, to crave them more. And so they're actually meddling with our biology, our taste buds, and that does have an effect on our brain pretty instantly, has an effect on our digestive system, and overall really just don't need them. Nobody at home is baking something or making a dinner and adding natural flavors. And so it's a good rule of thumb. If you're not adding it at home, although there's quite a few things that people probably add at home that they shouldn't be buying anyway either. But if you're not even using it in a recipe at home ever, then you definitely don't need it in your foods that you buy at the store. So one of the more interesting things that you've mentioned here as the fourth red flag are these synthetic vitamins and minerals. So this is called fortification. It's how they fortify or boost up all these vitamins and minerals that are missing from the foods. So, I grew up on the traditional cereals, and again, we won't name any brand in particular, but you could flip the box around and see, wow, vitamin A, 100%, vitamin, everything's like really high percentage, phosphorus, potassium. You can't believe it. Wow, this must be healthy. And then you realize that's not the food. They fortified it. They added it back in. And these things, unfortunately, are not as bioavailable. So let's talk about what some of those are to look out for, because if you just read the top of the nutrition label, you might see a high percentage. You got to dig a little bit deeper down into those ingredients. So walk us through some of those.
Synthetic fortification, like you said, can look really good. And for another number of reasons, it's probably not the best way to go about getting vitamins and minerals. B2, riboflavin is really common. Vitamin A is really common. Vitamin E, which is actually a preservative. It's not a wonderful, high quality, bioavailable form of vitamin E that's good for your hair and your skin. It's to preserve the food and make it last longer on the shelf mostly. And vitamin D. You'll see those primarily as some of the synthetically fortified vitamins and minerals in your food. Calcium as well. And so the issue here is that, so behind the scenes, when we were looking at making this plant-based milk, I ultimately made this for my son. When he was born, he had colic, and I needed to take soy and dairy out of my diet, was transferring in my breast milk. When I needed a backup plan, we looked at an infant formula. It wasn't there. And so we had to develop something in our kitchen. And fortunately, we have incredible pediatricians on the island, and we worked with nutritionists. And alongside them, we came up with our product. Because it's for kids and the only one or two other plant-based milks out there for kids heavily synthetically fortify, it was a question, are we going to do the same? It appears to be healthier, but because of my journey and experience with chronic illness, working with hundreds of specialists, doctors, allopathic, functional medicine doctors, you name it, I've learned a lot. So I came into the synthetic fortification question with a lot of skepticism. And what we found out as the founders were working with our teams of food scientists and nutritionists and pediatricians, each vitamin that you're fortifying the plant-based milk with or the other products comes with a list of sub-ingredients. Sub-ingredients can look like maltodextrin, a lot of other words that you cannot pronounce that are not food. I've never seen the majority of the sub-ingredients. I never read that word before in my life. A few stood out to me as no, I absolutely don't want that in this product, maltodextrin being the number one. And that was underneath of vitamin D. That list of sub-ingredients, 8 to 10, 15 sub-ingredients long, that is either helping the vitamin that is being synthetically fortified assimilate in the product, it's being processed with those list of ingredients. You're not required to put it on the label. So you, as the consumer, would pick up a plant-based milk or a bread or something that's enriched or fortified, and you would see 100% vitamin A, like you said, or 100% vitamin D, and think that it's great. Well, there's 8 to 10 other ingredients like maltodextrin that aren't on the label because it's not required. And if you are someone like me who is dealing with a chronic illness, who does have, a health condition, or you just really care about, what you're putting into your body, maybe you have food allergies, or you're buying for your kids, whatever the reason, that's not transparent. That a lot of the ingredients aren't on the label, even if it's small amounts. An argument could be it's such a small amount. Well, at this point, that's the argument for everything. Oh, it's in small amounts, but it's in everything. It's everywhere, and we're eating it every day. And obviously, because of the health stats we looked at earlier on in this, it is impacting our health, And so I'm really passionate about the synthetic fortification topic because of the lack of transparency. And I could talk more about it, especially vitamin D is the last note that I'll say on it. Vitamin D for plant-based milk, the FDA only allows vitamin D2 to be added, not vitamin D3. And, that's because of politics, really. Vitamin D3 is added to cow's milk. It's not even naturally occurring in dairy. I think people think it's naturally in there. Cow's milk is fortified with vitamin D3. Orange juice is allowed to be fortified with vitamin D3, but plant-based milk is not allowed to be fortified. Just vitamin D2, much less bioavailable, and just low quality. You can't ensure that these vitamins and minerals are high quality. They're often not. They're bought in large amounts. They're highly processed, and they're added to whatever food is being packaged. And if you really wanted to get a good quality vitamin B complex or vitamin D, it's best to get the supplement, from a reputable company that specializes in making those vitamin and mineral, supplements for health.
Yeah, exactly. None of this, of course, is nutritional or personalized health advice, but most people, when they go to supplement their vitamin D, which most of us are deficient unless we are supplementing, they know now that D3 is very different than D2. So that's an important point about knowing the form. The average consumer, I don't think, is educated on the different bioavailability of these different forms. They think vitamin C is one thing or vitamin D is one thing, but there are, not just in foods and fortification, there are fortunately some of the biggest nutritional supplement brands are a big surprise, using the cheapest ingredients that are not actually bioavailable. They're not really being assimilated in the body. So when people are looking for high quality nutritional supplements, hopefully they're coming from whole food sources. And similarly, when we're looking at the back label of a product, we want those nutrients to be coming from the foods. Otherwise, it's just an added in thing that we could be supplementing somewhere else and hopefully getting more from real foods in our diet. So a lot of these nutrients have been depleted for a long time from these food sources because of making things shelf stable, making them last longer for business standards and for profitability, but also the soils, as we touched on in the film I directed, The Need to Grow. The soils are being so depleted from these nutrients and these minerals. And a big part of that is because of our degenerative chemical agricultural processes. And one of the biggest culprits there is glyphosate. A lot of people have heard of this now. It's found in the product Roundup, originally created by the infamous Monsanto. Now that company is owned by Bayer. So this glyphosate chemical is used pretty much everywhere when food is not organic. And even when it is, there can be a bit of cross-contamination. But since this is something that is not on the label, no matter what, there are some ways that now third-party verifications are helping us to avoid this. So tell us about glyphosate. What should we look for to make sure it's not in our foods?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm so glad this conversation is becoming more widespread and it is more common knowledge. And there are even countries now who are banning the use of glyphosate. Mexico is one of the, more recent ones. And but still in the US, it is something we want to look out for, like you said. One of the easiest ways to identify if a product is safe to eat or free of glyphosate fully is if it has a certification from the Detox Project. That is my favorite organization. They do a really thorough job of testing, third-party lab testing the product and making sure that there is absolutely no glyphosate residue. And even though a product is organic, it can still contain residual pesticides. So that's why we had ours tested. I just want to know, as a owner of a company and also a mom, that I'm giving my product to my kid. Glyphosate has been so widely used in the US. Has been sprayed heavily on so many crops, especially oats, wheat, almonds. There's crops that have been more heavily sprayed, but if you're spraying the soil and it rains and there are rivers, there's runoff, nothing is an isolated event. And that's why it is, I think, imperative for us, to take that responsibility as, food manufacturer, owner of a food company, to just test for and make sure that there's no glyphosate in there. We are certified organic. It doesn't really matter, the farms that we source our ingredients from, we looked at a map. The way that we source has to be certified organic, and we want it to be from regenerative farms. We're still working on making all of our ingredients sourced from regenerative farms. Right now, we're in the process of connecting with farmers and helping them become more regenerative in nature. But we look at a map and we see if those farms, if that land is located around other farmland that is producing non-organic crops, because they're spraying and the winds or the rains, the runoff could contaminate. So even though it would still be certified organic, it could be contaminated with glyphosate. So look for that badge, glyphosate free. The Detox Project certification is wonderful. There are other incredible food brands who are, waking up to this and making sure that their product is safe for people. Generally speaking, you have eaten glyphosate. We've all had it in our systems, from the last however many years of eating food. It was just so commonly used. If you go to a restaurant, it's probably, you know, that's probably been sprayed with some herbicide. And so it's not something that I think we should have fear around necessarily, but awareness around absolutely, and demand as, you know, people of the earth, consumers, parents, just human beings, that it's no longer widely used. So yeah, look for that badge. And if it's not organic, I would stay away from oats specifically, wheat, rice, almonds. You can look up some of the other major crops. I would not eat it if it wasn't organic, because you know that, you know, it's probably been heavily sprayed.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. This isn't about becoming overwhelmed with all of these chemicals and processed additives and pesticides. It's about becoming aware, because unfortunately, you know, these things are a bit pervasive, but the human body has some resilience. The idea is we're trying to lower that toxic load. We're trying to lower that overall burden so that our body can process these things as best as it can. So we don't want to be adding them when we can avoid them. Glyphosate has unfortunately been found in a lot of water systems, even rainwater. So it's kind of everywhere, but it's not, you know, something to be fearful of. But we want to be supporting these brands, because with that awareness comes, well, what are we going to do about it? So we have the opportunity now to support brands that are taking the extra step to also support these farmers that are doing it the right way. So I love that you've gone above and beyond, actually looking at even cross contamination for nearby farms. This is something that most companies are not even coming close to doing. And even the glyphosate residue free certification, you're on the forefront of, because it's not that big yet. Not that many companies are doing it. But if these brands start to see that consumers want that, then they might be more incentivized to actually do it. Because at the end of the day, they're making decisions based off their bottom line when it comes to these bigger brands, and we can start to move the needle. So glyphosate is something that, you know, our mission at Earth Conscious Life has been so focused on, which, you know, really does come down to the food choices and the things that we buy, and then also what we can either grow at home, or, you know, how we're able to support really local farmers and farmers markets. So the soil degeneration thing is really near and dear to my heart, because for those who've seen our film, it's so connected to the future of our planet and so many elements of our biodiversity and our ecosystems at large, and also our internal ecosystem in our bodies. So let's just talk about, unfortunately, the kind of status quo of a lot of the competitors. So your brand is called Kiki Milk. It's an incredible product. I buy it. I drink it. I love it. And I'm genuinely grateful for someone putting this out there with the attention to detail that you have, because I was trying to avoid dairy for a long time, and the choices out there are pretty gnarly. And so talk me through just a few of those points that, well, really they all have those five red flags pretty much, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the 5 red flags are very prominent in plant-based milks, yogurts. You know, I think that different trends come into the spotlight, nutrition, health food trends, and the media picks up on it. And the last 6 or 7 years, plant-based was kind of deemed to be healthy. Just because something is plant-based does not mean that it's healthy or clean or made from whole foods or not highly processed. It doesn't mean that it was better for the planet either. You know, monocropping is super detrimental to the soil health. And so, you know, plant-based milk that is specifically not organic, that has all those, the red flag ingredients, those 5 red flag ingredients, and it's not organic, that means that, you know, it's probably at scale being sprayed if it's not organic, and there's not a lot of whole food in there. And so they're adding those ingredients in to try to make it seem like there's whole food in there and to put some vitamin and minerals back in there. It's something that is so easily changed. So if it's not necessary, I don't think that we need to be leaning into that anymore, making these products. It's not easy to change the world and the food system in this way, but it's absolutely doable. And each company that's doing it is moving the needle and having some ripple effect, some impact on the health of the soil and the health of people. Packaged food's not going away. It doesn't have to be highly processed. Packaged food can be just whole food ingredients. And it can be sourced responsibly and regeneratively. It will cost more money, but over time, the more demand and the more the people who are behind the scenes building these companies lean into those practices, it will get less expensive, and that will ultimately become the norm.
Yeah, as the saying goes, pay the farmer now or pay the doctor later. And the earth doctor is the other component, because as these systems become more and more destabilized, we eventually can't even grow food in those systems. So this is the investment, not just in our own health, but our collective health. That's what it's all about here, is that overlap of human and planetary health. And so folks can see some of the other common brands and those ingredient labels on the screen right now. You can see what you might find on the average product. And as folks will notice, a lot of those things that we talked about are unfortunately sneaking their way in there. And it's almost like reading the fine print, right? The ingredients are at this point now just reading the fine print on a contract, because we need to know what are we agreeing to when we purchase it. We're voting for it with our dollar, and then we're putting it in our own body. So we have to be paying a lot of attention. I know that you have used zero additives. It's organic. It's made with real food, whole food. You base it off of to try to get as close to human milk, because this is a product for human consumption. I love that. And it's been designed with a lot of people that I look up to in the nutrition and pediatric and medical space. And it's why I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I wholeheartedly support it. A lot of people that try it love it, especially those who know the difference. And so, especially when it comes to food, it's about the awareness. The more that we become aware of what's going into our bodies, the easier it becomes to transition. We can only continue to do these, negative habits when we really don't think about the consequences. And again, it's not just on ourselves, but it's on our family, and it's on the farmers, it's on the world at large. So Lauren, I thank you for the work that you're doing. And for everybody who's watched here today, you've been generous enough to offer a discount for people to try Kiki Milk. As you can see, the product design is so cool. I love your branding. It's really cool for kids, and it's about time we had something that's actually healthy, that has that type of branding, because we all grew up with the cartoon characters with all these junk foods full of sugar and all these processed ingredients. And so I appreciate that you're really taking on this industry to provide a solution for parents who do know better but didn't have an option. So tell us a little bit about how they can find the product and what discount we have to offer.
Yeah, sure. So we're selling primarily online right now through our website, kikimilk.com, Thrive Market as well, or Amazon. And on the West Coast, we're in a few stores. And we have a 20% off discount, which we're so excited to make this more accessible through giving discount codes. And as we get bigger, the product will become less expensive, but we are growing slowly on purpose so that we don't ever have to change the quality of our product. So you can find us online, and please use the 20% off discount code.
Amazing. So for anybody watching, whether it's this brand or you're looking at another food product or, a skincare line or whatever it may be, it's these companies that have actually held themselves to a standard that we need to be supporting, because those that have baked that into their branding and their mission, not greenwashing. We have to be a little bit careful because everybody's hopping on with the new buzz, but these are the companies that are holding themselves accountable, and by attaching their brand to such a clean, transparent philosophy, they are building themselves for long-term success, because you know it's a standard that now we want to expect as consumers. So and I know that you and the team at Kiki Milk really believes in what you preach and why you're doing it. And so I just thank you for the work that you're doing, and thanks for taking the time today to share, some of these top tricks to watch out for parents, and those 5 red flags. Like, those are things I look for every time I go to the store, and
Mhm.
this reminder as much as possible. So thank you for putting this together, and thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you so much, Rob, and back at you. The work that you do has inspired me and my team and so many people to build companies differently or to farm themselves. So thanks so much for having me on. And I'm so happy that we got to share this with everybody.
Yeah, guys, definitely try some Kiki Milk. Use the code, try for yourself, share it with your friends and family. You will not regret it.